Well, hello, everyone. Again, this is your host, Rashonda Thornton of the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. Again, I'm bringing on to you another guest who has a plethora of perspectives and ways that they see life. And this one in particular is not necessarily about food, but it's about how can we find ways to just build who we are personally and incorporate that self-growth and also be efficient in our time. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Before we move forward, I do want to introduce you to another one of my podcast partners, Undeniably Dairy. We know that is a organization that's founded with Midwest Dairy. And one thing about them is that Undeniably Dairy is all about cow care, the work that the farmers are doing, the sustainability practices, on top of the nutrition component of it. We know right now, especially during COVID, that dairy farmers, they're pretty much on the front line. It's one of the front lines workers. These are people who we rely on for dairy, and they have a lot in common with all the other people that have been doing everything they can to make sure that Americans are still being fed. So if it isn't evident now, day in and day out, we all know we wake up in the morning to do what we're made to do. Whether it's caring for our families or doing something kind or taking time for ourselves and pursuing a passion, we're strong and we're nourishing. So what's next? Well, when it comes to dairy farmers, they do the same exact thing. And they do it for us. They want to make sure that we have accessibility to not just dairy products and milk, but the nutrients that comes from those dairy products and milk. Learn more about them and their works that they've been doing, especially during our unfortunate events of the pandemic. They have been partnering with nonprofit organizations. They have done everything they can to make sure that these other sites are having the resources they need to provide that nutritious food for those who are in need. Check them out on www.dairygood.com or find them on Instagram at Midwest Dairy. So here we go. This is the interesting thing about nutrition. I'll start off with the title of saying nutrition is about discovery. And you may question, what does that mean? Well, I actually had a conversation with a client actually today, and this thought process just popped up in my head, and it just makes so much sense. When you are dealing with your interactions with nutrition, there is a struggle. There is times where you're frustrated. There's times when you don't know everything. You don't feel confident. You want to give up. You find yourself making excuses as to why it's just not the right time. Because you know what? When you start really digging into not just what you're eating, but your actions as to why you're, finding yourself, feeling like you have to be subjected to certain foods or feeling guilty behind certain foods, what you're doing, you're finding out a lot of things about yourself. Nutrition kind of forces you to discover things about yourself, because when you learn things about yourself, that's how you get better. When you think about other things that we're taught, like, eating a meal plan or, following a regimen for 30 days. Even just like, when you go work out, you're just following a workout plan. But what you're doing when you do those things, you're just following step 1 plus step 2 plus step 3 plus step 4. You're just like taking steps forward, but there's no discovery that's involved in that. And to me, that's why we always find ourselves disconnecting to nutrition or falling off the rails or feeling like it's hard to get back on track or thinking it's all too much to think about. A lot of it because we are just following a process. You're following a formula. You put A plus B equals C, and all you care about is C. You're not taking the time to see what is A and what is B and what are ways that you can manipulate A and B in a way that it makes C not just the end goal, but it just makes it as a result. So what I mean by that is when you look at nutrition and understand its discovery, use it as a discovery mechanism. Let's say your goal is to, lose 15, 20 pounds. Okay, so not just the 15, 20 pounds is not really what you should be thriving for. It's what you're doing and what you're actually acquiring as you're learning how to make the right choices or deciding is this right for you or do you should try something differently as far as your foods. Because what happens is that it causes you to think about different options. It causes you to think things through about, should you really do this? So for example, when you're facing a situation where, there is a box of donuts and the smell is there, it just looks good. You know it's going to taste good. And so when you're on a diet plan, all you're told is just don't have the donut, right? And guess what happens? We know what happens. So eventually we relent and the donut we eat the donut. But when it comes to nutrition and you're thinking about discovery, you're actually pausing in between before taking that reactionary step by just eating the donut to actually discovering what is it makes me want to have that donut. Is that donut self-serving me? Is it something that's bringing value to my life? Is it something I want to see myself having all the time the rest of my life? These are things that you're asking a lot of questions. And that's discovery. Let's give another scenario. When you're going out to eat and you recognize every time you go out to eat, you're having, the same, meal that is probably not the one that you would have chose if you want to live a healthy life. And you continue to go in that same cycle. And if you're in a diet, you're just told, just don't eat that meal. Just don't go to that restaurant. Instead of actually going to the restaurant and learning about yourself as to why is it that every single time you're given a choice of having something that's healthier and that's not healthier, and for some reason you're always going for the unhealthy things. That's called discovery. And when you find that when you use nutrition as a way to discover, you start learning what are your shortcomings, what are the weak areas, where are the areas that you find yourself constantly repeating, doing the same thing over and over again. You got to do that because once you discover what it is, now you can address it. Because we can always cover it up. We can always just say, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I'll just ignore it or deal with it down the road. You're not addressing the underlying issues. So what ends up happening, you repeat and do the same thing over and over again. Instead of asking yourself, why is it that I get so weak when I'm faced with this type of dessert? Why is it that I feel I have to have this? Why is it that I don't feel like getting up in the morning to just cook myself a healthy breakfast? The why is what you have to ask yourself so you can find out what it is that's stopping you from being successful in doing that. And when you start asking yourself these questions, it just causes you to think. Because now that you ask questions, let's start providing answers. You start answering the questions, ask yourself these questions, then start finding these answers to why you choose to not do it this way, or why you're choosing to have that, or why you feel a certain way. And when you're self-discovering this through nutrition, you learn you can decide a new way now. You can decide a new way how you interact with certain foods, a new way of the words that you're saying to yourself. And I'm real big, I'm famous on some of my coined words because I know when it comes to certain things that we enjoy, we kind of fudge with it. We go back and forth. We're not really secure, or we feel like it's all about this willpower. When you realize that there's certain foods that you surround yourself by, you're just not ready to, have that willpower, then you discover, maybe I shouldn't have that. Maybe I shouldn't buy that. Or, maybe I should go down a different aisle because that's where that food is going to be. Or perhaps we should just bypass that fast food restaurant because I know what's going to happen when I go to that fast food restaurant. These are all acts of discovery. So when you are when you are engaging in what you're putting in your body and your nutrition, start looking at it as also a discovery opportunity so that you can find ways that you want to be better in this path and in this partnership and this relationship with food, so that you no longer have to live in a world where you just aimlessly making choices because someone told you to do so or because you just think that's the right thing to do. So instead of flailing and going back and forth, going into the yo-yo, decide that nutrition is not really about just following some sort of rule. It's about learning and how to discover what are some of the behavioral habits that you find yourself in that you wanted to not be a part of, not be what's hindering you from moving forward. So I want to encourage you guys all the time because I know this is not an easy thing. If this was easy, a lot of companies would be out of their jobs, out of work. But nutrition is a big thing, and we struggle with it day in and day out. But until we start finding ways, piece by piece, we will continue to go down that pathway that we don't want to. So I want to continue to encourage you guys to be healthy, be happy, move forward, and also share this message if you know there's someone out there that can probably use this information. So I am very, very happy to introduce you to my new guest, Jeff Sanders. Okay, everyone, welcome again to the Dietitian Against Diets podcast show. As you should know, but just in case you don't, my name is Rashonda Thornton, and I am your host. I am happy to introduce you to my guest today, Jeff Sanders. He is a podcast guru, kind of been in the game for a long time, so I'm the one that's new to this, but you'll definitely know that when you start hearing his conversation. So before I give him the mic, I just want to do a little bit of introductory. That's the proper thing to do. So he actually is from Midwest. He went to school at Truman University, got his bachelor's in psychology, but he lives now in Nashville, Tennessee. But what he's all about is self-improvement. He's one of the thought leaders of this time. He also hosts, as I said earlier, a podcast show. This is called the 5 a.m. Miracle Podcast Show. You may have heard it before, but it's highly acknowledged and it's ranked as one of the top ranked as one of the top podcasts in the world. But with his podcast, he focuses on personal development and how to be most productive. He's also, and I like this part, he is a plant-based marathon runner, so he's into fitness, into wellness. He's a husband, he's a father, and he really likes bananas. Just in case, that could be a good trivia question. He has a couple life-changing books, two of them. And the first one is the 5 a.m. Miracle, which is similar to the podcast title. And the other one is the Free Time Formula. So I just want to welcome Jeff to the table. Again, it's an honor always to kind of be a part of the platform with other people that have already been doing this for so many years. It's a good way to learn from them too, So Jeff, I want to welcome you to the podcast show.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here today. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. I when I read your bio, a lot of times when you look at websites or you look at people can sometimes just kind of pump themselves up by showing y'all what's in them bells. But when you actually dig and you see the history and the work they've done, it gives you another perspective on that. This person has been in it for a while. They're not just did a couple of things and now they're the best at it. They put in work. You know what I mean? But I also know that not only that you put in work, it's always interesting to have that pathway that leads you to where you're supposed to be in life. I always feel like we're wherever we are in life, we're supposed to be there, and sometimes we don't have a clue of how we got there. So if you were able to just not say give me your whole life biography, but if you're to backtrack, how did you find those pieces of where you are in the position you are now and have so much passion behind it?
It's a great question. There's so many factors that play into it. I think that one of the biggest ones for me was that when I went to college, I double majored in theater and psychology, and theater was my primary focus. And I did that because I did a lot of theater in high school, and I just had this passion for performance, and I enjoyed acting. But I knew in college that it was fun, but I didn't want to be a professional actor. I was around people who definitely going down that path, and I knew that somehow that wasn't me. So I had a lot of questions. So I graduated college and immediately began to blog because I had a lot of thoughts in my head and didn't know what to do with them. So it was like public journaling. I was trying to figure out who am I? What do I want of my life? And it was through that process of blogging that I discovered all kinds of other people. Also, in that, my first job that I had was in sales, and my boss asked me to read a personal development book by John Maxwell. Oh. And I became obsessed with personal development through that book, and also discovered, John Maxwell is a speaker, he's a writer, he is out there kind of doing lots of things, and no one told me it was a career path. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I kind of combined my own blogging habits with this, background in theater, with this new love of personal growth. And I began to put the pieces together and realized there's a future in this. Somehow, even though I was working day jobs I didn't like, and I had, a life path that was all over the place. I was moving around the country, didn't really know what I wanted, mm-hmm. but there were certain elements that seemed to make sense. And so then my question became, well, how do I become like a John Maxwell figure? How can I be a speaker, a podcaster, an author? How do I make that my career? And so those are the questions I began to answer for myself, and began to create a side business that later on I got laid off my full-time job and knew this is my moment to jump ship and mm-hmm. become a full-time entrepreneur. So let's do this. That was 6 years ago. And so I've been doing this full-time ever since. And I feel like the path was not one that I would have predicted. I never would have mapped out exactly that, looking forward. But looking back at it, the pieces were all there. Yep. It was just a question of putting them together.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on that. I'm sure there are a lot of entrepreneurs that, they just know they have a passion to do something and they haven't put the nail in their head. But things that it's never A plus B equals C. It's always A1 plus B squared equals minus C third. Like, it's never a straight path. But when you look back at it, you see, okay, this is why I majored in this. This is how I was able to use this skill to help me with this. Okay, then this comes with that. Oh, now I totally see something different. Oh, I see a person already doing something like that. How can I be my own self to that extent? Not be a John Maxwell, but be my own version of myself, but recognize there is a pathway to this career. I would have to say, just real quick, you made me think about when I decided to be a dietitian. Before I was a dietitian, I got my first degree in biology. I worked in genetics. I love science. I have a minor in psychology. And so when I kind of pieced together the biology and the psychology, and then when I got a second degree in nutrition, like, I realized, like, it's not about food, or it's not about following a diet. Like, it's something deeper as to why people do what they do. And I feel like that changed my mindset. And I decided, you know what, this is a route that has been untapped or has been undersaturated because marketing and the way we look at food is totally warped. What can I do in my space as a professional, healthcare professional, that can go against the grain a little bit? And that's kind of how I took myself. And I didn't know, like, all of these things would kind of just start folding on top of each other. But when you look back at it, like, it's a reason why you took that route. And so you can say the same.
Yeah, totally. It's bizarre looking back at it, because I would love, like, I'm a very proactive type A guy. I love to plan things. I love checklists. I love to be able to say, like, I'm at point A and here's point B and here's exactly how I'm going to get there. But life does not work that way. It's not that linear. It's not that straightforward. And it's so unpredictable. But yet at the same time, there's so much we can learn from our own life stories if we just are aware enough to know our own skill set, our own interests, opportunities that exist in the world that previously I didn't even know were there. And then as soon as I discovered them, all of a sudden, the doors are open for more opportunity. And I love discovering all those new possibilities and then leaning into those to see what they bring. And I always find amazing new things. And that's how, like my current job title, someone asked me, like, well, Jeff, what do you do for a living? It's like, which one do you want to hear about next? Because I have so many random things I'm doing, and it's really hard to pin it down. And so I don't pin it down. I'm just like, whatever you want me to be today, sure, let's go there.
Yeah. And that's a great question. I was going to ask you, if someone heard your name, how would they define, like, what it is about you that when whether they seen you talk or they heard you on a podcast show, like, or they read your book, like, what would be what a person would gather from that information? How would they describe you? Like, how could you bottle that up into, like, let's say 2 or 3 sentences?
I think the most people who have heard me, who have followed my work for the last, let's say, 10 years, would probably describe me as someone who is high energy, organized, productive, and is trying to help other people with more of those elements of their lives. And so that, to me, is kind of like the main topics of my podcast, like, boil down the main categories I discuss: healthy habits, personal growth, productivity. That's really what my work is all about. How it comes about is in a variety of forms, but it always comes back to me figuring out how to become the best version of yourself and how to utilize your time in a way that's more effective so that you can bring more of yourself every day and get more value out of your time. So that's what I go for.
Okay, that's a great answer. It's like the elevator pitch. Whether you got 20 minutes, 2 minutes, or 20 seconds, you got to be able to say what you stand for, no matter what amount of time you're giving.
That's right.
Yeah. So, like, now I really want to kind of focus on, what is. I know that your podcast is thriving. It's been doing well. It's been acknowledged in so many different places. Like, what have you, because obviously you told me you started this podcast like 7 years ago, and so this was before the world of podcasts had just kind of exploded. Now it's a little bit too much going on. So people, it's hard to see between the weeds sometimes. But before it actually became a thing, like, what drove you, like, what was it that created this opportunity where you said, I want this platform to where I'm going to help people in this type of way by having these conversations, bringing on, like, who you are and what you represent in ways that you can help people? Like, what drove it to that sector?
I chose podcasting mostly because I had the post-college story where I was, at the time, I moved from Missouri to Boston, and I had I walked to work every day. It was about a 45-minute walk. And because Boston's a walking city, so I had a lot of time. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts. That was what I was doing on my morning and evening commutes. And so I discovered that I loved listening to shows. I was learning a lot, and it was a lot easier than trying to read a book. And so I thought, well, it's very efficient. It's a great use of my time. And then I thought, well, if I can combine my my theater background, which has me wanting to do something in performance, something with creativity. And I know that I have this, at the time I was blogging, and I thought, well, I want to explore more of these topics that I'm digging into. I realized there was a connection that podcasting would give me the chance to leverage the content that I wanted to create with the own questions of my life I wanted to answer, to talk to amazing and smart people to help me answer some of those questions for myself, let alone the audience learning along at the same time. And so I realized that there was something in podcasting that would give me the chance to get started without a gatekeeper. I didn't need an agent. I didn't need some big deal. Like, I could literally just at the time, in my apartment in Boston, start recording a podcast. Now, I launched a show when I was there that lasted 3 episodes, and then I killed the show because it was a terrible, terrible podcast. My brother actually emailed me after the 3rd episode and asked me when I would stop because it was so bad.
What was the name of it? I mean,
the show was called Gibberish. It's no longer on the air. You cannot hear it anywhere. I pulled it from the internet, which is a good thing. But I knew that I enjoyed the process, and all I knew at the time was that I need to figure out how to bring together, the best topics with the best people, with more organization, more of a thought process around scripting together content that really can help people. And then it was about probably 5 years later that I actually launched the 5 a.m. Miracle, and did so knowing that I wanted to be a professional podcast that I would do once a week. And I have stuck to that for 7+ years going. And now it's just like, I knew at the beginning what it could be. I just had to put together the pieces to figure it out. And so for me, it was just, once all those pieces were in place, the podcast had to exist. Like, I had no way to not do it at that point, because I was so into it.
Yeah, I know the feeling. So what came first, the book or the podcast?
The podcast launched first, and it was 1.5 years after the show launched that I got an email from a publisher who said that they were looking for someone to write a book about productivity, and they thought that I'd be a good fit. And I was, at the time, already thinking about doing my first book. And so it's just a question of like, well, how can we do this immediately? Because I was really excited to get started. And so I decided at that point to use all the content from the podcast and create a more clear through line of what the podcast is really all about. So the book was my first chance to define what this show really is in very clear terms, and what my message really is to the world about early mornings, about healthy habits, about productivity. So that was my really good chance to finally do that. So I was very excited to do that book.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So a lot of times it's the other way around, but someone approached you and you were able to just pull your experience already, kind of capsulated inside of some reading material that can still help people. Well,
it's kind of bizarre too, because my second book happened in a similar way, in which a different publisher approached me for that book, only they basically chose the topic for me, and they wanted me to kind of write the book for a niche that they wanted to fill.
Okay.
And so it wasn't as much of my book as it was theirs. And that process, let's just be honest, was not one I liked, was not what I want to do again. So my future with writing books is probably going to be self-publishing, only because, I mean, as a control freak, as a guy that loves to kind of, carve his own, path in that sense, like, I want to do my own thing. And so self-publishing is very similar to podcasting, very similar to blogging. Like, you control the narrative, you control all the content, and that gives you complete leverage to, share what you want to share with the world.
Yeah, I think that is so important. I can go on a rampant of like the whole deciding whether you're going to self-publish or go to publisher, and like what rights you have, because they control the cover, they control like what goes out. Like, you're just kind of like working for them, and you're still able to be like, your voice may not be your voice. So I totally understand like going to the self-publishing direction. And so, some people that may not have heard of either of your books, like, if you can like, not necessarily give me inserts of a book. I'm not looking for inserts, but like, obviously, that people struggle with being efficient, procrastination, all these things fall underneath that. And that's reflected out of, everything from how to take care of themselves, everything from, if they're always late for work, or their clothes are wrinkled. These pieces that you see about a person can give you indication of like, them maybe not utilizing their time well, So my question to you is like, what are some of the main drivers that you help people with when it comes to, is it like a how-to, or is it like, how do you help people to kind of turn that corner and start being more efficient and being more intentional in their day?
There's a lot of different approaches that I've taken, and I think the one that seems to be the most consistent is that I really push what you just mentioned, which is intentionality, which is the idea of saying if your time is your own, which I believe that it is, then you have the power to make different decisions. And so if you're not getting results that you like, then there are different paths to change to get different results. And so it's just a question of analyzing what is not working in your life and removing those things, and then what can work better and having more of that. And so the time management aspect and organizing, when you wake up, when you go to bed, what you do when you first get out of bed, all those things are just reflections on your priorities. And so it's really figuring out what do you want, what results are you going for, and then how do you reverse engineer that to have every day's schedule line up to you getting those results. So it's a very calculated way to kind of approach your life, and feels really artificial at first until you start to get results. And then all of a sudden you realize there's a lot of power in setting boundaries for yourself. There's a lot of power in being intentional. There's a lot of power in knowing, here's what I do, here's what I don't do, here's why I do what I do, and why I don't do these other things. And knowing like that kind of self-awareness that's then baked into a very intentional daily schedule, well, that changes your outputs. And then all of a sudden you're getting different results, and you can lean on that and have more momentum and then do more of that. And so to me, that it snowballs into a better life.
And I hear the underlinings of like what you're doing. You're telling people to put themselves, prioritize yourself, prioritizing your time is prioritizing yourself. And that's basically you're putting yourself first. So it goes back to the personal development component of it. And you're reflecting it by learning how to implement a way of living that is, you're not, wasting your time. When you're wasting your time, and I know we all do it, when you're sitting there watching social media, or you're looking at a YouTube channel, or you're watching someone else live their life or watch someone else's life. And you're not using that time that you can be enriching and filling back into your own life. And that's huge, and I think about now, I can take it a step further. You think about like our children, the teenagers, the younger kids, they see the parents do it. It's really a part of their world. Like this is not new for them. They grew up in this. And so you find the society turning into a society that's not, we're all taught, efficiency, be work smarter, not harder, all these different cliches. But I don't think that we really know how to do it, or we're not in a society that's built upon teaching people how to, create some separation and, like I say, create boundaries. And I think that by you instilling these actionable points for people, or even just perspective ways to do it, it helps them to kind of really center back into, I'm doing this for myself, I'm putting myself first, I'm going to prioritize everything that I do, because guess what? My time is valuable. So I think it flows back into that personal development part. That's like, I think that's kind of like your underlining message. How can you make sure that you carve time out for yourself?
Which, people have asked me before, like, are my messages designed for teams or for companies? And it's like, at the end of the day, I'm really talking to an individual. I'm talking to every single person. Like, what is your life? What do you want from your life? How does your schedule reflect your life? And that's where the real change takes place. Like, it's great if a company is more efficient overall. It's great if culture shifts. But the reality is, like, if you don't change your life, no one else is going to do it for you. And if you take control of your life and you have power over your decisions and your time and your activities and your employment, like, all of a sudden you are in control, which is both the freedom to do whatever you want and the responsibility of knowing, now that I'm in control, I have to make some really difficult choices and, cut things that aren't working and add things that could. And then for me, it's like, it's a wild series of personal experiments, trying out all kinds of things to figure out what you actually want to do with your time and what works and what doesn't and why. It's a process. It's a lifelong journey. Like I'm 36 now, and I feel like I am just at the tip of the iceberg of discovering a whole new set of things I could be doing. And I'm excited to dig into new things. And so to me, I want to continue that same sense of just like, what else can I do? And how can I be curious about life? Which I feel a lot of people lose as they get older. You get jaded, you get tired, and life is hard. Like, I'm not denying that. But at the same time, it's like, because it's hard, I would rather have energy, enthusiasm, momentum, and figure out how to have more of that every day.
Yeah. I love it. You see me over here shrugging my shoulders and smiling, and none of this take, guys. So this is one thing. So in your book, you talk about adopting a health first approach. It's a surefire strategy to guarantee you can achieve your most ambitious goals far into the future. So this is where I feel like we kind of see really, really eye to eye on. One thing I always tell people is that you got one life. You don't get a Jeff 2.0. You don't get a Rashonda 2.0. You get one opportunity to live the life that you want to live, relatively, right?
Right.
And for me, like if I have one chance when it comes to my body, my health, the choices I make, I think life is about, if I'm going to live life from my first breath to my last breath, I'm going to exhaust life, which means I'm going to do everything that I want to do. I'm going to experience a different thing. I'm going to make the most out of that. And I cannot do that if I'm not taking care of my health. I'm not taking care of myself. So I use that in a way to try to help people, like, if you're going to live this thing called life, you need to kill it. No pun intended. Like, you need to like go in and just be your best so you can experience the best, And so like, I feel like, when you made that statement about your health first approach, like, I feel like we are in line with like what that really means when it comes to taking care of yourself.
Well, and for me, the health first approach was not always my first approach, right? Like health for me, it became important because I had what most people experience at some point. You get a health scare if you stop taking care of yourself. And for me, I let productivity be my driving force. And so I experienced an extreme form of burnout and had a panic attack that led to me going to the ER. And so that scared me to death, like literally thought I was going to die. And at the time, it wasn't actually a heart attack. It was something else, some stress-induced panic attack that scared me. But it also led me to realize I'm too busy. I'm trying to do too much. Like, the one hand, yes, I want to squeeze more value out of my day. On the other hand, if I do that to the extreme, I won't have a very long life to live. And so I need to find balance between my priorities and also rest and margin and relaxation, and having those things feed me to do more of the things I love, but making sure that, like I said before about boundaries, well, one of those boundaries for me is to stop working at a certain point in the day and go to sleep so that tomorrow can begin again. I can try a whole other plan. And I love a health first approach, not just from the perspective that I can stay alive longer, but also because I have more energy. It feeds me to be able to do more of what I love. I've experienced life when I'm not healthy and life when I am. And there's no doubt that when I'm healthy, I like my life more. And so I can't imagine now at this point not having health be my first priority, because I know that it allows me to do all the things I want to do, to be a better husband, better father, better business owner. All of those things become possible if I'm healthy, and they're impossible if I'm not.
Yeah, that's so true. And I'm glad you brought that point up with the balance part, because balance is a part of it. You work hard, you have to create that time to recover, to, separate yourself, to get your mind right, to get keep everything kind of at a bay so you don't go too far left or too far right. And then a lot of times as adults, as parents, husband and wives, I think we feel, at least when I come across several clients or different groups of people that I talk to, it's always about, doing everything you can for someone else. And then whether it's working yourself to the bone, overworking, not sleeping enough, just picking up anything that you see quick because you don't have time for yourself, it causes that exhaustion. It causes the opposite. We're working so hard to create a life, we actually take away from our own life. So I know that balance is a heavy part of it. And I don't know if people really, I guess I'll ask you, because I don't think that people really know how to create that balance without feeling guilty. So how would you speak upon that?
Balance is tough because I think that a lot of us take on a lot because we feel obligated to do a lot. There are everything from, my boss told me I have to be at work for these number of hours and do this kind of job, to, my friends expect me over here. My family thinks I should be doing these activities. I personally want to do stuff. There's a kind of generic societal goals for you to do certain things in a certain way. Like, what happens, I think, is we lose control of the reality that we control our time. And I always come back to this as the basis for all of this is that your life is your life, your time is your time. And if you feel like you're a victim of your own life, then you need to take back control of your time and reprioritize it for you as the center of it, at least for a while, so you can get the balance back in place. A lot of people, if you're a parent or if you're an employer, like, you want to be a giving person, you want to help other people, and giving is amazing, but you can't give if you have nothing to give. Like, there has to be something with you first. And so if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to be exhausted and useless to other people. And so if your goal is to serve people or to be better, you need to take care of yourself first. And so the balance aspect to me is essential. It's the core piece. It's the beginning of all of it. And if you don't have that in place, the things you want to see take place, the goals you have in your life, they're not going to actually either happen at all, or they're going to happen poorly, and you're going to be tired and you're not going to enjoy the process. And life is process. That's all we do day in, day out. It's process. And if you're not having fun, you're not enjoying it, if it's exhausting you, something's wrong. And something has to change.
Yeah, I feel like people have to feel they have to live a life of strife to live a life of purpose. I think that strife is needed because strength begets from strife. Strength comes from strife. Yeah, there you go. It's tongue twister.
Right.
But that's not, I don't feel like you're meant to always live in that mode. You may need to do it for a time period to accomplish something, but you shouldn't feel like that should be your norm. It goes back to like people feeling like they feel guilt, especially women, we feel guilty that we go to the gym and leave our kids with the husband or their older sibling or something, that we have this kind of anxiety feeling that we're not doing our duty as a mother. Or if we decided to opt out of, maybe I don't want to cook dinner tonight and you guys, will eat leftovers, because perhaps I want to go make myself go get this nice salad at this restaurant that I've been dying to have. Be okay with that. I think that people just they really struggle with it. You can say it all day long that it's okay, be okay with not being being selfish. Recognize what selfish means. Selfish means that you don't take a sabbatical and you take a week away from your family. It just means it could be 10 minutes of your day that you carve out and detach yourself from the family, regenerate, read your favorite book, listen to some songs, go take a long bath, go take a long walk. All those are pieces that can be a part of being selfish. But like you said, it helps you to overflow and be that person that you're serving, that you're giving, that you're caregiving to. And I don't think that, people really can grasp, incorporate that into their life so they can really see what it looks like on the other side.
Well, to a certain degree, you have to kind of live that life for a while to know what that feels like. You have to kind of give yourself permission to take those chances and say, I'm going to, take a couple of weeks that are just about me and see what happens. Will your life fall apart? I kind of doubt it. What will probably happen is you'll feel better and then you'll want more of that. And not in a selfish way, like you said. It's really about making sure that you have the foundation that you need to be able to do the things that matter in your life. And, everyone has a different situation. There's a lot of variation when it comes to, what we feel kind of empowered to do and obligated to do and all those things, but you take a chance to examine your life. I do a weekly review process. Every week on Sundays, I examine my whole life and find out, what was happened last week that was good, what was bad, what can I learn from last week to improve this upcoming week. And it's about an hour a week, it's 1 hour on Sundays, maybe an hour and a half at most. And in that time, I'm just asking myself some really simple questions. How can I make sure this next week is going to be better? And that leads to changes to my calendar. It leads to changes in my habits. It leads to me adjusting things to make things fit in a better way. And it's not hard to do. It doesn't take that much time, but the impact is enormous. And I've done this every week for probably almost 10 years now. And I can't imagine not doing it because that reflection period is so valuable. Because if you don't reflect, when do you have the chance to learn from your own life? And otherwise, you feel like you're just going to always be in that same cycle. And at some point, you have to pause to be able to say, wait, what's going on here? What's happening? Now, how do I change this? And so that's my process, at least once a week.
I like that. I really, really like that.
I learned that from David Allen. The book Getting Things Done is an essential read if you love productivity or the idea of structures. That's where I really got my love for productivity came from him. And then the weekly review is a big process that he preaches in that book. And it's one that I have used for many years. And it's one that I really can't imagine my life without it, because it's just the power of reflection is just huge.
Yeah. And I'm sure you would agree. It also creates the power of reflection creates clarity.
Oh yeah.
Having more clear, you're more clear. Like you say, you're able to kind of open up and kind of sift through and discern between, what can be taken away, what needs to be added. How can you learn from find solutions, and always trying to find the mistakes, but create solutions so that you can reapply. And I think it gives you more clarity moving forward. And again, if someone doesn't take time for themselves, they don't practice some of these things, they would never have their clarity piece. And that's another huge part of it.
Well, a lot of what I do, in the work that I've done with the books that I've written or the podcasts I produce, like I have almost everything that I teach now comes from these like little moments of clarity that I get. And then I want to share those. I want to help somebody else. If you're in a moment, you're like, well, I'm stuck between these two places. Which way do I go? Like if somebody else has already been down that road and they know which path to take and why, and I can provide just a glimpse of like, here's some clarity to help you make that decision easier. All of a sudden, these bigger choices and these daily just decisions we have to make become a lot easier. I feel like I spend a lot of my time debating, what's the best use of my time and how do I make sure I can juggle all these things I'm trying to juggle. Well, if you can have very simple priorities and simple principles that you're living by, then all of a sudden it's not a difficult decision, which, do I eat the banana or the pizza? Like all of a sudden it's not hard to decide. I know I'm choosing the banana. And I don't want to have to think that hard every day with these simple choices. I just want to make the right choice, get those benefits, and then be able to use my brain power on more complicated, bigger things and not on simple daily things as much.
Yeah. I like that. You conserve your brain power for something that really needs that attention versus wasting time and energy into something that should not be that complex.
Right.
Now, I know you say you do a lot of talking, you do a lot of speaking engagements, and of course right now with things that are happening, there is a little bit of a limitation, but I know that there are still people that you probably work with, or you probably speak maybe remotely. And so I do have a question for you that I think that will be kind of valuable for a lot of listeners. What would you be so simple? And I always say simple is always like it's something. Things can be simple, but it's not always simple. It's not always a good way to describe it because it's not really simple.
Right.
But what would be some actionable steps or some ways that you would help people that help them to step away from not procrastinate so much to actually start kind of prioritizing it and carving out time for themselves so where they actually are making progressive changes, whether it's their career, their parenting, their relationships, their health. I mean, I think we just love to kick that can. And we always make excuses as to why we shouldn't, but like there's had to be, I'm sure you have 101 different ways that you work with people that are doing it. But if you can narrow down just maybe one or two, just to give people a couple of nuggets of how they can like step away from that procrastination mindset and really start working towards their goals, whatever it is in life, because that's a part of life is, reaching those goals and living in those goals, living in it, actually not just reaching them, but living in them. And how can you help people to kind of switch their perspective on that?
Well, I think that for me, like the reason why I started the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast and the reason why I have the book is that to me, the 5 a.m. Miracle speaks to the core of really one of the main principles I live by, which is intentionality. I mentioned that before. And for me, that plays out with if I go to bed early and I wake up on purpose at the time I set for myself, which for most people means probably a little bit earlier than you currently do. So let's say if you typically get out of bed at 7 a.m., what if it was 6 a.m.? And what if between 6 and 7, you did something for yourself that was important? It could be just organizing your time for the day. It could be doing some yoga because you needed to stretch. It could be reading a book. You choose the activity that you need for your life, and you do that at 6 a.m. And then all of a sudden, your day has started off more productive. You feel better. You got the chance to do something you normally don't have time for. And for most people, that then by the time the day is ending, you're going to go to bed about an hour earlier, which is probably a good thing because most people waste their time late at night. And if you're not wasting your time at night and instead are using that same hour now in the morning, and it's productive and it's efficient and it's tied to one of your goals, well, now all of a sudden you have an hour a day you just gained. And that hour can be used however you want, and it will probably be used towards a goal you care about if you do it on purpose. And then all of a sudden you've gained, 365 hours in that year. What could you do at that amount of time? Probably a lot of stuff. And all of a sudden, your life has a sense of there's a productive hour, at least one that's yours, and you can do a lot with it. And to me, if you plan that hour intentionally, all of a sudden you have this like magical chance to do something that otherwise feels like you'd never have time for it. You're just too busy. It's never going to happen. But what if you did? What if you had an hour? There's a lot you can do at that time.
Yep. And you would never know until you carve it out. It'll always be a mystery.
Right.
No, but I think that's a great, that right there just kind of puts you in the weeds and to let you step out, to let you see how much you can occupy time as far as that you can use that is productive and even in a given year. So I think that's like a great, just a way to get people to just, switch the hour in front of your day versus wasting that time at nighttime. And just doing that one simple thing. And like you say, find an activity that suits you, that serves you. and incorporate that into your life and be intentional. I think that's great. And so many people out there that even that right there making changes in their lives. So I do.
And there's a lot of people that, well, they love early morning routines. Wake up early and I would do affirmations and meditations and before breakfast. But like my perspective is not that you don't have to fill your mornings with 1,000 activities. Like I really love the idea of keeping in things in the sense of being simplistic. Choose one and make sure that one thing gets done and make sure that one thing is really important to you. And then all of a sudden the rest of that stuff is a whole lot less meaningful because the thing that mattered got done. And I feel like that's the way you begin your day is you say the thing that mattered happened. And now all of a sudden the rest of this day doesn't feel like it's going to beat me down because I've already won the day first thing in the morning.
Love it. Great. Jeff, I appreciate you so much for coming on and you just just within our 30-minute conversation, you brought in some heavy thoughts, ways to think. And I think, again, there are so many people out there that need this type of information, just doesn't have a clue where to start, because anytime you tell someone to start living any type of life that's self-serving, the first thing is, where do I start? And even something like that can be something that will get people going the direction that they want to go towards, and then they start filling in the spaces. I want to make sure that people even know like how to get a hold of your book, even both of them, how to listen to your podcast. So take this moment to just give us any way that we can contact you or connect with you or follow you or anything like that.
Sure. The website is the best place to go, which is jeffsanders.com. I've got links there for both of my books. Of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble has those books as well if you want to go to the book route there. My podcast, The 5 a.m. Miracle, is on every podcast platform you can find. If you find one it's not on, let me know, but I'm pretty sure it's on all of them. And so those are the best places to begin. The website, the 5 a.m. Miracle podcast, and then, of course, the two books, The 5 a.m. Miracle and The Free Time Formula.
Great. Well, I think that you're you're probably very easy to find, but there are some people out there that needs a little bit of help to figure out where you're at. So again, thank you for being on this podcast show. Everyone, we have Jeff Sanders all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, but he is across the world in so many different platforms. So look him up, check him out, and really find ways you can be more productive in your life, find ways you can better improve some areas of your life that you want to improve. Because again, like I said earlier, you only have one life to live. Again, thank you, Jeff. This is Rashonda Thornton, the Dietitian Against Diets. Again, as I always say, it's never against going against diet. It's the diet mentality, the mentality of being structured, the mentality of being in the cage, the mentality of being not really who you are. So how can you start changing that story, changing your life, and bring in foods that helps you to be a better person by connecting with it in a different way? So guys, stay healthy, stay strong, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay, hope you guys had a great time listening to that conversation. He had me, he gave me nuggets on how I can make choices in the morning to make better use of my time. I think there's so many different voices out there that we're all meant to, help others in their journey. And he brought a great perspective that I think that we can all apply and figure out how can we be most efficient. Great conversation. As we're heading out, I want to recognize Prairie Farms. Now, Prairie Farms, they're actually within the Midwest Dairy Council. But what I want to say about them, they have just been a standout organization over the last 6 months. They've had campaigns called Our Caps, Your Cause, where they help to they match up money from your caps of your dairy products, whether it's your gallon milk or half gallon mix, and they allow you to put that money towards the organization that you want to support during COVID. They also stepped up in light of the pandemic. It's been the hub for local dairy farmers. So over the last 6 months, they've been collecting dairy goods, dairy milk, dairy products, and been able to siphon those dairy foods to nonprofit organizations like the food banks and other charities. So they have really been, finding a way to utilize their employees, their mission, to make sure that in light of what we're all dealing with, they're still finding ways to help feed those who are in need, but not just feed them, but feed them with healthy foods and nutritious and dairy products. So thank you, Prairie Farmers, and for stepping up and partnering with these other organizations to make sure that those people are getting what they need. Learn more about Prairie Farms at www.prairiefarms.com or follow them on Instagram at Prairie Farm. Again, this is the Dietitian Against Diets. Talk to you guys next week.